So this is your first journal that you're responsible for. So you will want to put it in your journal. It'll be the first one whenever we take our journal test. The first one that will come up. So remember, you need to write your date. You need to write the date, you need to write the EQ, and then you need to answer this journal question that says, look at the bracelet and give me 2 intensive properties and 1 extensive property. So you should be working on your journal because this is the first one that you're responsible for. Date, write your EQ, and then answer your question that's here. This is asking for intensive and extensive properties. So be sure you label which ones are which. If you're just putting if you just list 3 properties and you don't say whether it's intensive or extensive, it'll be hard to know that during the journal test. So this should go into a composition or a spiral, something like that. Mackenzie, you're writing this in your journal, which was either a spiral or a composition book that you should have gotten by now. You are not writing on the slide. You're writing in your own thing. I know I've missed somebody, but I don't know who I've missed. I'll call out in a minute. So you should be doing your journal right now. In your spiral, your composition book, whatever you like. Date, EQ, and then answering this journal question. Be sure you label them whether they're intensive or extensive. So you would be able to know that if it was asked on the journal test. I'm going to call out a few names because I know I missed somebody that came in. Is Kylie here? Adonia? Andrew? Yeah, that's who I missed. I see Andrew. I knew I missed somebody. Knew I had missed somebody. Remember, journals are always in the Google Classroom for a few days. So if you're absent, you're still responsible for a journal. So be sure that you get it from a friend or look into your Google Classroom and get it from there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started on this. You would want to write your date. And like I said, you would want to write the EQ. And then the journal question was, looking at this little picture, has a gold bracelet on a balance that has 31.4 G's. I said, look at this bracelet and give me 2 intensive properties and 1 extensive property. Who can give me an intensive property? Something that that bracelet owns. Carmen, please turn a light on for me so I can actually see, please, ma'am. Something that bracelet owns that is not dependent on the amount that is present. That would be an intensive property. Who has an intensive property for me?
The bracelet is gold.
Gold. The bracelet is gold. Perfect. That would be 1 intensive. What would be another intensive? If you could touch that bracelet, what would it be?
It's round-ish.
Roundish. Roundish. What about, how would it feel? Soft, hard?
Hard.
Hard. That would be another one. It's a metal, and in general, most metals are somewhat hard. What would be an example of an intensive property? In this particular case, there's kind of only 1 intensive property shown. An intensive property depends upon the amount. So what would be the intensive property here?
Miss Lowry, do you mean extensive property?
Yes, thank you. Whoever that was. What would be an example of an extensive property?
It is
Remember,
314 grams.
it's mass, exactly, which in this case was 31.4 grams. It's mass. Other extensive properties that are not shown in this picture, but you know, if I told you it's volume or its length, all of those are extensive property. Those change depending upon the amount of matter that is present. Okay. So just as the last time that I'm going to do an example, let's see if I have something in the chat. I'm just having trouble getting. Somebody asked me if we're supposed to be writing this down, and it's the journal, and we're going to use it as a test. And I've been saying that for about 4 times. So yeah, I would want it written down so I could use it for my journal test. So this is the last time I'm going to do an example. So I put the date. The EQ was the same as Tuesday. Now y'all needed to write down the EQ because y'all weren't doing them on Tuesday. I was doing them on Tuesday. So if we happen to have this same EQ on Monday, instead of you having to write it down again, you can just reference Friday. And then that way, if you need it in the journal test, you can just go back and look. And then I put INT for intensive, so I would know go color and hard. And then extensive, I put 31.4 grams. Okay. So when you come in, there's always going to be one of these showing, and you need to work on it whenever you first come in, either to Zoom classroom, or there also will be here whenever y'all come back in, I guess about a week, y'all will be heading back here. All right. Anybody have any questions on that?
Miss Lowry, Ella's
Yes, ma'am.
Zoom isn't loading her in.
Somebody, you're going to have to talk up a little bit, babe. I can't hear you.
Ella's Zoom isn't letting her in, like it won't load all the way.
It won't load. Okay, thank you. Who said that for me?
Abby.
Okay, thank you. Would you tell her to make sure she does the exit ticket for today,
Yes.
and then to look at my YouTube, and it'll explain what she needs to do.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And tell her thanks for communicating. All right, so we're going to start off with your safety quiz. So if you go into your Google Classroom and you come down under daily work, you should see quizzes. I had several people that stopped under daily work and they did the lab safety acknowledgement. That's not the lab safety quiz. We're doing the quiz. So come down under quizzes, pull up your lab safety quiz, view assignment, and then click on it. It's going to be a Google form. Yours won't look like this. It'll be all open with you being able to answer it. And go ahead and take that. We're going to do 10 minutes on that. Grades were really high last period, so I'm sure they're going to be high again.
Miss Lowry, I don't have it.
If your Google Classroom has been open for a while, you may have to close it out and open it back up. Because it was just released this morning, so. We're going 10 minutes on it. So if you're not working on it, whenever the 10 minutes is up, you're turning it in anyway. Whoever said they couldn't find it, were you able to find it now?
Yes, ma'am, I got it.
Good, okay. Louise, are you doing the safety quiz?
I can't find it either. And
Okay. You may need to close yours out and come back in.
I did.
You found it? Good.
No, I didn't find it.
Okay, we'll go past daily work. That's journal, PowerPoint, daily work, past daily work. There's practice, and then there's quizzes.
Okay, I found it.
Tuesday. And so looking at chemical and physical properties and chemical and physical changes, we're going to have a quiz over this on Tuesday. So probably one of the things that people were most confused about were the intensive and the extensive properties. So I have a video for that. I'll show you and see if that doesn't help you out some, and then we'll talk about the practice. Let's see what am I wrong with my. Oh, I got something muted. I don't want that. All right, now let's see.
Come up when you're making measurements, and we'll refer to it being an intensive or an extensive property or variable. And what we mean by these is we really mean it's a property that changes with amount, or it's a property that's more intensive, which doesn't change with amount. And right there is really what your definitions are. Any property that you can measure that as you change the amount of substance, but that property doesn't change with the amount is called intensive. A really great example of this is temperature. It's one of our premier intensive variables, if you will. Great example, if you had a glass of water that's 25 degrees C and you pour half the water into another glass and ask yourself, now what's the temperature? The temperature is still 25 degrees because it's an intensive property. It absolutely does not matter about the amount that you have. It's intensive. Now, let's compare that to the mass of the water. If I have a glass of water, I know its mass is, say, 500 grams, and I pour half of it out. Now the mass is not 500 grams, it's 250 grams. That's because that's an extensive variable. Extensive properties vary with the amount, and we love to quantify amounts. We quantify mass in grams, we quantify amount itself in moles of substance. We quantify Length, how long is something? How tall is something? Volume is a great example of an extensive property that actually brings in length 3 times, height, depth, and width. You multiply all 3 of them, you get yourself a volume, which is very extensive. You get more amount, you get a bigger volume. An interesting thing, though, about extensive properties, if you ratio one extensive property against another extensive property, you get an intensive property. A great example of this is density. Density is mass per unit volume. The mass is extensive. The more you have, the more mass you have. Volume is extensive. The more volume you have, the more the number goes up. If you ratio them, mass divided by volume, you get density, and that's intensive. The water example I gave earlier, when I pour it, doesn't matter when I split it, the density is still approximately 1 gram per milliliter. Even in the part I poured off, it's 1 gram per milliliter. So this is an important concept you will see over and over when you're answering problems numerically in a chemistry class. Is the answer an intensive or is it an extensive property? One last thing, extensive properties by themselves tend not to reveal much about what the substance actually is. For example, let's say I have a substance and I tell you it's 500 grams. That really tells you nothing about the substance other than the amount I have. But if I tell you I have a substance that has a density of 1 gram per milliliter, it really limits you on your choices of what that could be. And so what we tend to do in the sciences and what we do in chemistry is we list intensive properties. And if you get a good listing of them, it truly identifies that substance as being a unique version of those intensive properties. Meaning, we like to characterize matter by listing intensive properties. And that's really what the importance of both of these things are. You need to keep track of them.
All right.
This
So,
presentation spoke about the properties.
all right, so what y'all are going to be working on today is practice over physical and chemical changes and physical and chemical properties. If you're not in front of your camera where I can see you, could you please adjust yourself? I'm really tired of seeing people's ceilings. And I'm really tired of asking about it. So if you will go into your Google Classroom and go under practice, this is going to be the practice that you are going to do to help you prepare for the test, not the test, the quiz over this on Tuesday, and then eventually the test when you come back to school. So as I talked about on the first day of school, most of your daily grades come from quizzes, and to get prepared for a quiz, and we do the practice to get you prepared for that. So if you look under practice, the 2 that says Google Slides are the practice that you can work on and type on. And then the one that says it's a PDF, that's the one that you can go and you can check your answers. So you'll open up one of those. So this one is going over physical and chemical changes. So here, salt dissolves in water. Would that be a chemical change or a physical change? And you can just put your X there or your check there or whatever you want to do. Remember, anytime something dissolves in something else, that's simply a physical change. Now, like I said, probably what people were struggling with the most were your extensive and intensive properties. Extensive and intensive properties only apply to physical properties. Extensive and intensive does not apply to changes. And all chemical properties are always intensive. So you would only use extensive and intensive if you're talking about a physical property. And you'll see that on some of the practice, and then you'll definitely have to deal with that on the quiz on Tuesday. All right, so does anybody have any questions about the practice? So one set of practices over changes and one set of practices over properties. And so I'm going to give y'all some time to work with that in class.
Miss Lowry, I got a question. It's
Yes,
not about the
It's not about the paper, but are we supposed to mark the quiz as mark as done, even like after we did it?
You don't have to. You don't have to. Because this is a Google form. It comes to me no matter what. But thank you for asking. You don't have to turn it in. The practice, you don't have to turn it in after you finish right now because since the quiz isn't till Tuesday, you may want to look over it between now and then. I guess I lost Emily. Did I lose you? No, Emily. Emily, why don't you go ahead and take that safety quiz again? It did not come through. Did you make sure that you're doing the safety quiz and not the safety acknowledgement? Okay, never mind. It just came through, Emily. You're good. Thank you. We must just have a slow internet connection. You're good with your high grade. So now you can work on your practice. So we're going to work on practice for the rest of the class period. And then the last thing you'll do is to do your exit ticket.